I might. I reckon you're listening to the PAL movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week it's more of the same pandemic life for all. I know I've been letting you know what I've been up to during this boring as shit time in life, and I'm going to continue to do so. Regular listeners know that my family and I have been doing the quarantine thing for about 5 weeks now. Holy crap. I've been to 3 public places since this thing started. The Green Store twice, and I had a root canal early on in this process. Unfortunately for me, I still need more dental work, and I can't have it done for at least another month. My dentist said that if I'm in really bad pain, or if my gums swell a bunch, I should call him or go to the emergency room. That sucks, and I'm really bummed on this, because I shouldn't be having these problems. I go to the dentist twice a year, and they mark the teeth that need to be watched, and then they fill them if they need it. So I do proper maintenance. But my problem these days is that I have a brand new young dentist who keeps fucking up my mouth. I mean, I went to the dentist in December to have a cleaning, which turned into a crown and then a filling. I get the work done and the filling was too high, so I went through 4 different adjustments and my dentist still wasn't able to fix my pain. So he sent me over to the endodontist instead. I go to the endo early on in the pandemic and I find out that the first cavity I had filled should have been a root canal from the beginning, and the crown that I had built, well, that should have been a root canal too. And to add insult to injury, that cavity that was filled and it was sitting too high, well, it cracked the tooth below, so now that tooth will either have to be pulled or it'll need a root canal and a crown. Man, I miss my old dentist and I really need to get rid of my new one. The old dude, he loves snow and he had a second home at a place that's known for being the biggest hotspot in the world for coronavirus, Sun Valley. His replacement, this new guy, well, I first met him over a year ago and he let me know that he was a snowboarder, which I thought was cool. It made me like him more for a minute. But then, when I said I was a skier, he was like, "Oh, I would have thought you snowboarded." And then he went all cool guy on me because he snowboards 6 times a year. He seems to make the skiing is lame comment every time I see him, and I see him a lot because he does such a poor job with my teeth. But those are my problems, and I should have brushed better when I was a kid. I hope in all of your worlds, things are as good as they possibly can be. There is a lot of doom and gloom out there. I know people who have lost their jobs, who have lost sponsors, who have been furloughed, and things are only going to get worse. I'm feeling it in my world as well. Hopefully you don't have the same dental bills adding up as I do coming out of this thing. While all of this is scary, we're all in the same boat, and there's something comforting in that. I guess my parting thought on this rant, though, is just to say thank you to all the people who are doing all the shitty jobs right now that I would never want to do. The doctors, the nurses, the supermarket employees, the liquor store workers, the weed store employees, and anyone else out there putting themselves at risk for the greater good. Thank you for doing that, as I would not want to do any of your jobs other than maybe the weed store guy. But I have a job for a moment, and it's podcasting. And this week I have a multi-sport guest, a professional skier, a professional mountain biker, and a guy who's an aspiring actor who's living in Hollywood right now, trying to make ends meet on the big screen. I'm talking about Deane, and we're going to talk a ton to Casey. But before we get into it, I want to ask you to do a few things for me. The first is subscribe to me wherever you listen to the podcast. The second is follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement. And finally, please support my great sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Evo, Stanley, 686, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Now, let's talk with Deane. How's the knee?
Knee's doing really good, actually. Feeling pretty strong. Pretty good time to have the whole world get taken down to where I can't be skiing or biking or doing something fun, so that's good.
Yeah, when did you get hurt?
I got hurt the first week of January, actually.
What did you do to the knee?
So I ended up doing my MCL, PCL, and then I slipped a meniscus out of the inside of my knee. So I kind of did a pretty good job, actually. And somehow I managed to not end up doing my ACL, which is apparently super rare.
Yeah, does that cut out like 6 months of rehab because you didn't get the ACL?
Yes and no, but at the same time, I had kind of an interesting thing happen. So I did this when I was over in Austria, and due to just a few different things, like the way the meniscus actually slipped out of my knee was locked. So the doctors were like, well, I feel like this is an emergency surgery and we need to get this done. So I actually went straight into surgery. And because of doing that, that cut a big part of the recovery down to where they didn't actually put any graft or any ligament in my knee. So I actually have my MCL and my PCL reattached 6 hours later. I mean, it was so crazy because basically I did it within 30 minutes. I was going into an MRI.
Wow.
And 45 minutes to an hour after that, I had the full diagnosis from the surgeon and from the doctor that was there in Lek. And I was getting wheeled off to surgery like 6 hours later at 2 in the morning, and I woke up the next day with a fully reconstructed knee.
That's crazy because you're in another country and you're an athlete and your knee is like the most important part. I mean, other than your brain, I guess, is one of the most important parts of your equipment per se, or your body. And right away, they're like, hey, you have to make this decision and you don't really have time to consult with doctors back in the States, I would think. Was it scary? Are you kind of rolling the dice?
Oh, yeah, dude. I mean, it was fucking pretty nuts. But at the same time, it was good because I was there with Lorraine Hubert, who she's had surgery with this doctor before, amongst many other ski athletes, you know. And then her boyfriend is a good friend of mine. He actually had leg surgery from him the year before because he broke his leg in Austria. So I had a lot of people that I knew and trusted that all had surgery over there. And they explained that when you rupture a ligament in your knee, what happens is it basically shrivels up over the course of maybe a couple weeks, and it's like a fern, you know, as it like draws back. That's what it looks like inside your leg. And that's why they have to reattach it. Whereas if you go directly in when the rupture is fresh, then you can just go ahead and reattach the ligament if there's enough length there, depending on where it was ruptured. So that's actually what happened with me, which was really cool. And that saves a lot of time for the recovery process because one of the huge things is I had no atrophy in my leg. I mean, I worked pretty hard in the gym and it was right at the beginning of the season. So I hadn't been out of the gym at all and went straight into surgery. And now 2.5 months later, my legs are actually the same size already.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, all in all, it was a little nerve wracking. I mean, I'm going into surgery. I got some Austrian guy shaving my leg that doesn't speak English, being like, deine Blut ist hart, you know, at like 2 in the morning. And I'm like, dude, what am I doing here? My season's over. Looking back, I'm really happy that I did that because if I would have come home, man, it would have been just a total mess, to be honest. I mean, it would have taken, I don't know how long to get in to get an MRI and then see an orthopedist and all this stuff. I probably would only be like maybe a month post-op right now.
Totally. How long have you been locked in your house being able to rehab? How long have you been quarantining?
Man, we've been pretty locked down here because I'm in Los Angeles. So I mean, I've been locked down for probably about 2 weeks now.
Yep, we're at the end of March. So yeah, 2 weeks is kind of what you should be doing if you were smart and watching the news.
Yeah, what about you?
I am on 18 days today.
Wow.
Yeah.
How's it feeling?
This is my job. I sit in a little room, and a lot of times I have people come to the little room with me, but I sit inside and edit and record. So my kid's at home, and it's really tough on him, but I'm dealing just like everybody else is. It's not that big a deal. I just need to get some more beer, I feel like.
Yeah, I know. That's the funny thing is, I mean, obviously we're all kind of dealing with maybe not getting paid and stuff like that, but it's like, so wait, you just have to stay home and chill all day?
Yeah. And I'm not even that big of a drinker, but now at like 5 o'clock when it rolls around, I grab a 10 barrel. I have like the big pub ones. They're like 25 ounces. And I only do one a day because I just have to make them last because I don't want to go to the grocery store. I feel like that's where you'll get it.
That or the hospital is pretty much the petri dish of this virus for sure.
Yeah. But let's not talk about the virus. I talk about it with way too many people, and that's all everybody hears all day long. We'll talk about your life and times, and you grew up in Sandpoint, Idaho, which is pretty much Canada. How far from the border are you?
I think I was about 40 miles from the border. We're pretty close. I mean, there was a pretty heavy amount of Canadians coming down when I was growing up, so we were around Canadians all the time.
And I've never lived in a border town. Could you just go into the woods and head over to Canada and do whatever you want there and then come back, or is the border more secure than that?
No, you nailed it, actually. Growing up was nuts because I grew up in the pre 9/11 era. So for me, growing up there there was so many times where we would rip up on the Jeep. We had a old CJ5 Jeep, and we'd go out grouse hunting or doing whatever it is and looking for new places to go camping and stuff like that. And I remember one time where we're up and we got kind of turned around on these Forest Service roads, and we're coming back, and my dad's like, "Oh, hey, hold on. See what that sign says?" And we'd been going for probably a good half an hour coming back, and we see this sign tucked into the trees that says U.S.-Canada border.
Well,
So we had been in Canada for I don't even know how long, but just wasn't even that big of a deal.
then 9/11 happens.
Yeah, then 9/11 happened, and I even knew before that, being on a border town, I remember lots of dudes that were running drugs back and forth.
Oh, yeah, weed was huge, I would think.
Oh, it's huge. And what guys were doing is they were actually taking dirt bikes, packing as much as they could on the bike, filling a duffel bag full, and then they were ripping up to somewhere up around Fernie and then coming back down because we were just below Fernie. So hearing those stories, though, it's interesting because that's something that I actually grew up around, and you would hear stories. And there was one dude, he was always in line on a powder day, but he actually had a snowboard boot, but his ankle bracelet was there, so he had to cut a hole in his snowboard boot to fit the ankle bracelet on. And I was probably like 16, 17 at the time, and somebody was explaining, like, "Oh, yeah, that's the dude. He got busted coming back, and they caught him with like 50 pounds of weed, and that's so anyway, he's on house arrest." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." That's what goes on.
That's crazy. And you're kind of born into ski life living there. I mean, I think your dad might be a patroller at Schweitzer. Is your mom into skiing as well?
My mom actually broke her ankle super bad in college. So her ankle was fused pretty much from the time that I was born. It was really stiff. So she had trouble getting ski boots, but she would come snowmobiling and stuff with us when I was younger. But eventually she kind of didn't really do much in the snow just because it was so cold and stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, my dad was a ski patroller briefly at Schweitzer Mountain. So he had quite a bit of avalanche training and stuff like that. And then he skied even before that. Yeah, that's where it all really came from, is growing up 4 or 5 miles from the base of Schweitzer Mountain. And then my dad being a patroller up on the hill and then skiing POW all the time.
So yeah, you start young with Schweitzer right in your backyard, and the mountain is your babysitter. On top of that, your dad is taking you out in the backcountry. And I'd say, unlike most skiers I talk to, other than maybe Ian McIntosh, your backcountry experience starts way earlier because of your dad taking you out there. What kind of shit do you learn as a kid that most people don't learn until you're in your 20s?
Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, my dad really shaped my life, especially when you phrase that question, because he learned how to do all the avalanche training from being a patrolman. So by the time I was maybe 5 years old, I was doing beacon training with my dad inbounds at Schweitzer off of Chair 1. So he would have me and my brother go up when I was probably 5, and my older brother is 2 years older, so he's 7. And so he's got us going down, and if we couldn't find it in under 4 minutes, we had to go back up, and then we had to do it again. So my backcountry training started at a really early age. And my dad, he would take us out of school anytime that there was a powder day. And so he would take us up. And at this time, in probably first, second, and third grade, I was in public school. And then the public school system, if you don't have your kids in, any day that they have a missed day, that's the reason that they keep attendance, is because they get paid for each day that the kid is in school. So my dad was pulling us out, and we had straight A's, but they told my dad and my mom that they were going to flunk us because we didn't have our attendance up. So start from third grade on, they actually pulled us out of school. And so I was homeschooled my entire life. So I would sit at home and I would do as much schoolwork as possible. And then as soon as there was a powder day, I would just go skiing every day. And then eventually it got too crowded for my dad up on Schweitzer. And by the time I was 10 years old, we had a 95 Phaser and a 1994 or 1995 Enticer. Those are like 2 old Yamaha snowmobiles.
Mm-hmm.
And we started going snowmobiling and skiing primarily in the backcountry from the time that I was 9 to 10 years old.
That is amazing. Most kids that I talk to that are homeschooled, they do that because either the schools in their area totally suck, or that they're going to have a huge career in sports and their parents know that. So they're like, we'll homeschool you so you can go on your trips early. But that wasn't really a thing. It was just your dad didn't want you to fail out of school and he wanted to take you out of school to go ski.
Yeah. And so, like you said, there's those kids that grow up and their parents wanted them to be super good at a sport. My dad basically did it unknowingly. He unknowingly trained me to perfection to be a backcountry professional skier. I got like the avalanche training starting, and then I learned how to ride snowmobiles, which was really invaluable because at the beginning of my backcountry career, I already knew how to ride snowmobiles when all the people around me were just learning how to do it. And at that time, I'd been riding snowmobiles for over 10 years, almost 15 years at that point.
I would imagine your first video shoot that you go out to that's in the backcountry, no one knows what to expect from you because they just know you as skiing the mountain. And then the second you get on a sled, they think you're going to be the weak link because usually the new guy is, and you're better than everybody else.
Yeah, I'm like a full sled neck.
Yeah.
So it was really cool because I had all these things too that in the beginning, like you said, instead of being the weak link, I could actually be the guy that was just like, oh man, this guy's super on it, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he knows how to work on snowmobiles. And he'd be like, hey, can you help me put a new Hyfax on my sled? I'm like, yeah, sure, let's do it. We got half an hour. We can bang that out before we go, you know? And it's so interesting because as you're growing up, and even my dad didn't really realize, and it actually clicked maybe 3-4 years ago or something like that, where I really understood how valuable every little thing that my dad harped on me and made sure that I did it correctly and stuff like that, and skiing and avalanche training, and then learning how to ride snowmobile, all of that stuff, how it basically accumulated to create the person essentially that I am now, and gave me all of the framework and all the skills to become a professional backcountry skier. You know, it's pretty wild.
Just because your dad needed to have you as like a wingman out in the snow?
Yeah, exactly. You know, he just wanted two guys to go out and go shred with, basically, you know?
Yeah.
So he perfectly trained me and my brother to go do that. And that's what we did. I mean, the whole time growing up, it was the three of us, and we were always out there. And I learned how to sled lap when I was 11 years old. We would even take my dad up, drop him off, and then he'd go do a lap, and we just kept trading off all day. And fast forward later, the only thing that's different is just like you got a camera pointed at you, you know?
Yeah. And when's biking start for you? Because I think that's also a big part of your childhood as well.
I remember riding bikes from a real early age, racing my brother around the backyard and stuff like that. And we grew up in a really cool spot where there was this place that we had called The Hill, and there was all these trails and stuff. So from the time that we were on BMX bikes all the way up to when we got our first mountain bikes and stuff like that, we were always out riding and doing stuff, you know, because I grew up on a farm, and we were always like digging jumps and doing all sorts of stuff. And I actually didn't touch a bike for a long time, but my season basically, as soon as winter stops, which is usually around like mid-April to end of April when I stop filming, literally the next week I'm on my bike and I'm usually shooting or filming. Like last winter, actually, when we were filming for the last Level 1 movie, I actually started shooting mid-April, early April for Canyon Bikes, and we had to do a bike release video, and then I think it was maybe a week later we shot the last shots for the Level 1 movie. So I was just kind of starting into the bike stuff when I was finishing up skiing.
And nobody really does that. I mean, you're one of the few people that are a dual sport athlete. There was Jimbo Morgan back in the day. You have Sean Palmer.
Yeah.
But there's not too many people that do that. But back when you're a kid and you're biking, you're on that whole Norba circuit and you did the Canada Cups and biking pretty serious as a kid?
Yeah. I mean, because I played baseball and baseball was kind of it.
Baseball sucks.
Dude, I fucking hated baseball, man. And it was so weird because I thought that my dad wanted me to play baseball, but he coached and did it because we wanted to do it. And finally, I was just like, dude, I don't want to do this. So I rode cross country and stuff like that, and I was super into it. That was the deal, you know? And then coming around there was like the rise of Lance Armstrong when he was at his peak. So cycling was really taking off. And then, I don't know, I was probably 15, 16. We started riding motocross. That's really when things kind of changed, to be honest. So I was like riding seriously, but when I started riding motocross, that was just so much fun.
That ends your cross country stuff?
Yeah. And then actually, when I was 18, what really did it is I wasn't really sure on the whole cross country thing because the whole deal is I wanted to race downhill the whole time. And my dad, you know, he didn't want me to get hurt. And I would just always go full send, you know?
Yeah.
So I ended up blowing my knee out, my right knee. And I did ACL, MCL, PCL, split my tibia plateau. I mean, I just
Blew it up.
grenaded my knee riding motorcycles when I was 18. So I had knee surgery and then came back. And I was getting really fast, really quick on a moto. And I started racing professionally when I was maybe 19.
On Moto?
Yeah. So I did my first pro race, I think, when I was 19. And I remember I was racing intermediate, and I had stopped doing any bicycle stuff at this point, except for to train for motocross. And I was at this race, and I started catching up to the pro guys. And I was like, well, shit, if I'm racing intermediate and I'm catching the pros, I'm going to get a trophy when I get done. Why don't I just bump up and enter the pro class, and then I can get some money?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I started doing that. And 2 weeks later, they had a race at some track in Idaho, and I showed up and I entered the pro class, and I was top 5. So then it started from that, and that's what I really got into. And at the same time, I mean, I'm skiing, and I'm skiing in the winter, but in the summer, I'm racing motocross. And I was pretty focused on both of those. And I was training really hard with the intention of racing AMA Nationals and wanting to do the Supercross and stuff. And I just kind of always thought that depending on what happens, I'm going to either be a pro motocrosser or I'm going to be a pro skier. But I always wanted to be a professional skier. That was really something that was set in my mind. And I was focused on that from the time that I was thinking back. I mean, when I was really young, my brother and I would pretend that I was Kevin Andrews and he was Scott Schmidt. Because I grew up watching Greg Stump movies from my dad and Warren Miller movies. So my brother always got to be Scott Schmidt, but I was always Kevin Andrews because my real name's also Kevin. So I had been imagining that for a long time, all through my early years and then all through high school. So anyway, yeah, I'm racing motocross at this point, and then that's when I was 20 is when I moved to Tahoe to focus on becoming a professional skier.
Now it is time for me to take my first sponsor break. And my first sponsor is Evo. And while Evo's retail locations are closed for distancing, don't worry. If you haven't been to evo.com lately, you are missing out on the best deals on the internet. Evo is the first website to focus on the digital space in action sports, and they do it better than anyone else. They have all the brands, all the products, and the resources and customer service to make sure you get what you need. If that's not enough, Evo offers free shipping on orders over $50, a low price guarantee, and a hassle-free return policy. And I have a special deal for you. Shop for any Evo branded product that is as good or better than the big brand stuff, and when you check out, use the code POWEL20 and you will save 20% on your entire order. Evo gives a percentage of sales back to local charities, and right now, that is more important than ever. My next sponsor is 686. They have been the independent outerwear brand in snow since 1992, and they make the best gear on the planet. That's no bullshit. My 686 Glacier jacket is the best jacket I've ever owned, and it comes with a lifetime guarantee. The whole Glacier series does. And since 686 shipped me a pair of Everywhere pants, I've lived in them. They're so comfortable, and like all 686 products, there's so much attention paid to the pocket, style, and detail. Let's be honest. Times aren't great out there right now for a lot of things. But it happens to be the greatest time ever to get your hands on some 686 outerwear. Is the sale of all sales. So head on over to the website, 686.com, and get 40% off all Gore-Tex styles and most apparel site-wide. Those are some of my great sponsors. Now, let's jump back into the podcast. Were you a total Grom, like your high school years and everything? Was it watching not just the ski movies, but moto, bike, whatever you can get your hands on, and that's kind of all you're about? Is that the person that you are?
Yeah, I'm just like total Grom, psyched on surfing as well, and just like any moto magazine, moto movies, Crusty Demons of Dirt, whatever it is, I'm watching all of that, and we watched all the AMA Nationals and stuff. And then at the same time, I'm watching all of the early MSP movies, Poor Boys movies. I mean, I watched Happy Days countless times. I wore that tape out.
And is your skiing a lot of park skiing as well? I mean, I'm sure you're getting your powder days just based on where you live, but is there a lot of park skiing going on too?
Yeah, so that's actually when I started with, man, it's just so crazy. It's just when I think back to this stuff. But yeah, I was riding park And that's originally what I wanted to do. I mean, I was always skiing powder day, but any day that it's not good snow, I'm skiing in the park. Even today, I usually start the season off with just riding park almost every day for at least like a month or two. And a lot of us, guys like me and Stan Ray and Wiley Miller, kind of like the generation that came from park, we still all ride park. Even ABBA. Like when I'm up in the park at Black Park, I mean, I see ABBA up there all the time when it's not good out early season. He's always out doing tricks on jumps and stuff like that. And yeah, I started doing rail jams and slopestyle contests when I was maybe 17 or something like that.
Was there the stomp games or something like that around the block?
Yep, stomp games. So I did stomp games, and that was another one where I was looking at what was going on, and I placed in like some amateur stuff, and I entered the pro category because he couldn't do any inverts in the amateur category. And the first tricks I learned on skis was a backflip and a Lincoln loop. And then I learned a 360 and then a 5. So my bag of tricks were all inverts, and they wouldn't let me do them. So I was like, all right, well, I guess I got to enter the pro class. And I remember the first pro slopestyle thing I ever did was at Stomp Games. In fact, Andy Mayer won, which to me was like the coolest thing ever because that was the year he was rocking all army green. He was in like that set. You remember that Sessions ad that he had hitting the Baker Road Gap?
Yep.
That was the year that he was doing Stomp Games. And I remember being like, holy shit, that's Andy Mayer.
Yeah.
And then there was like Nick Rizzuto and a few other guys from Schweitzer. And I think I placed top 10 or something like that. And in my mind, I was like, all right, well, this is it. I'm a pro now, you know?
Yeah.
Because I did, a couple pro contests. That kind of like shaped things to where then I moved to Tahoe to become a professional skier / professional motocross rider.
So that lights the fire. And then your brother, I think, is in Reno already or something. You move that way and do a little school and focus on being a pro skier?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there was 3 options. There was moving to Salt Lake, there was moving to Tahoe, and then there was moving to Whistler. At the time, I was just coaching gymnastics, and so...
Are you a gymnast?
No, not really. I mean, I did trampoline, and then I did train at the gymnastics center, but I ended up just coaching more than I was. And my dad started us actually on the trampoline at a really early age and grew up on the trampoline and stuff. I just kind of I started coaching when I was probably 16 or 17. It was one of my only jobs basically that I had.
Okay.
So at this point, I'm not getting paid to ski. So Whistler was out, even though I wanted to move to Whistler. Salt Lake, I couldn't get a hold of anybody. And then had an opportunity with my brother in Reno and Tahoe. The Gaffney brothers were there. McConkey was there.
A lot of rock stars there.
Oh, yeah, it was huge. And it was right in the shift when everything kind of started to move over to Salt Lake. Now I think it's more spread out. But at the time, there was a huge amount of people in Tahoe. And that's where things were happening. And so, yeah, I ended up going there and started going to the community college and ended up moving in with my brother after 6 months, living in Reno, which was cool because that's where I met the guys from Moment Skis. And I rode for Moment for 8 years or 9 years.
And that whole Moment thing, it seems like it's kind of a lifestyle. Luke and his crew like to have a good time, but it seems like it's park focused with a little bit of urban, and then everything stops for a powder day combined with drinking a shit ton. Would that define that crew?
Yeah, pretty much. And there was a cool thing for me because Moment was in its infancy. I got one of the first pair of like probably 10 skis that Casey pressed.
Okay.
So they were super small and kind of nobodies, and I was super small and basically nobody. And so it was just a really good thing for both of us that as my career grew and as Moment grew, we actually really grew together. And it allowed me to start getting free skis and getting money where it would have been harder from working with a bigger brand, with like K2 or Fisher or something like that.
Yeah.
So I moved down there, and that's basically where my career really kicked off, was skiing in Tahoe.
And is it just contests and powder skiing there as much as possible?
There was the snow bomb contest. They were doing contests, and my whole goal was do that, get good enough, go to the U.S. Open. And finally, I ended up getting hurt at a contest and crushing the lower vertebrae of my back, just warming up.
2009, right?
No, this was before that.
Oh, before Homewood?
So at Homewood, yeah, that's when I did my lower back. And I realized then I just hated doing slope contests. That is not what I wanted to do. I was getting super frustrated. And this is also about the same time that I got invited to my first park shoot for Bigger Picture with Tanner Hall, and Bushy was there, Vanular, CR was there, and this is right after CR's head injury. And there was a pretty gnarly accident up in the squaw park. Me and another guy were hitting the hip at the bottom of the pipe, and we were hitting it all the way over the top, which is a 90-foot hip. And this guy ended up going too far and having a traumatic brain injury and ended up dying.
Damn.
And that was like really, really rattling for me.
The first time you've seen anything like that?
Yeah. I mean, the first time, and a lot of people never see that in their whole life. But for me, I mean, it's the first time I realized that you can die doing what I love to do.
And it's talked about, it's thrown out there, but no one really thinks it's ever going to happen or they're ever going to see it until that day.
Yeah, and you always think like, oh no, man, you got to be skiing in the backcountry. You're going to get caught in an avalanche, or you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And then all of a sudden, to have it happen in the terrain park that I ski every day, and then suddenly you watch somebody die doing something that I'd been doing for the last couple weeks, just having fun on, it was pretty sobering and very rattling, and it kind of made me question a little bit of what I was doing. And to be honest, too, for me, in the park scene, I just had trouble doing certain tricks. I was doing like nines and stuff like that, and I was having trouble with getting switch sevens to switch tens and stuff consistent. I mean, I never even did a switch 10, and that's when things were starting to blow up. And I just felt like I was fighting it, and I wasn't really having fun.
If you didn't do a switch 10 back then, that was like the trick that you saw. Like at the US Open Big Air, it was 19 switch 10s and like one other trick. So you had to have that in your bag. You didn't. There was some footage around that time, though, that I want to bring up. Maybe it's 2006, 2007-ish, where there's video of you where you're just like full-on gangster thug skier. Yes. And that was a movement back then. How did that even happen with you?
Dude, you know what I love doing that a lot of people don't know is I love doing urban. I loved it, man. Any day that it was not a powder day, any time it snowed in Reno, I was doing urban. I had a whole light set up. I had everything dialed, and hitting rails, hitting big urban drops. I really loved hitting big drops. The biggest thing I could find, I was trying to do that. And then as soon as the snow was gone, then I'd go ski in the backcountry. But for me, I always gravitated towards filming. And even when I didn't have anything to put it into before the internet really blew up, I mean, there was New Schoolers, but there was no outlet really for the videos at this point in time. And yeah, I mean, I loved doing urban. And that was just kind of the style in skiing. You probably saw the footage of me in that huge Oakley one piece. And it was nice because it kind of rebelled. It was just different from what I grew up doing. That just stiff, stuck-up image of skiing, I didn't want to be a part of that, you know? I wanted to be what was new and what was happening. And that was how all the guys that I basically looked up to dress. I mean, you see Andy Mayer when he rolled up to Schweitzer at that contest at the time, rocking double XL or XL Army Green. It was just like, dude, he was the man. And the other thing, actually, about Super Gangster stuff is it hid all of the little discrepancies and the small movements when you're in the air.
Yeah.
So it actually made you look smoother. And I realized that earlier on, that the baggier clothes you had, you could actually get away with more and you would look smoother and more stylish. But it's pretty funny to think back to that. Buying a pack of t-shirts, it's triple XL so that you can go skiing, you know?
Yeah.
That was definitely a phase.
The contest phase ends for you at the comp at Homewood, I feel like. You're getting in your final training run, you over-rotate a backflip, and you break 3 vertebrae, and it's a serious injury. Is this one where you lose feeling in your legs and they air flight you to the hospital?
No, in fact, my dad actually broke his back maybe like 5 or 10 years after that riding motocross and did the same thing. But what happens is you essentially crush the vertebrae and it becomes smaller. So it is like breaking your back, but it is breaking your back and it crushes the vertebrae. but there's nothing you can really do.
It's like compacting an aluminum can?
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
So I just let it heal. I mean, I was off snow for quite a while. It's like a 6 to 8 weeks thing.
Okay.
And in my mind, actually, I was just like, fuck contests. I mean, I waited around all morning. They raked the jumps and they just put a really weird pop on it because I had already hit the jump. And after they raked it, I just was like, oh, I'll do another run down to the bottom and did a backflip. And I got kicked so hard that I just tried to lay it out and then over rotate and basically imagine landing on your back on ice. So that happens. And then go into a few months later, I get invited because I was sponsored at this time. Highball was hooking me up, and a few other people in Highball was sponsoring the movie because they had Bushy on. The movie being The Bigger Picture, Tanner's movie. And so I get to go to this park shoot, and I'm like, this is it. First big shoot, Squaw Valley, this is it. End up watching that kid die on that hip, and it really just made me question everything. I was like, I don't love doing this. I hate this. And I actually messaged Andy Mayer. I wish I still had this on News Schoolers, being like, I really love what you're doing and your style and everything like that. And I always looked up to Mayer because he was never doing Switch 10. He always just did his own thing. It was soon after that he zero spin pyramid gap.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of really looked up to Andy in the sense of you can just do your own thing. You don't have to be doing Switch 10 mutes in order to be a pro skier. And Andy actually replied and he was like, yeah, man, screw it. Just do whatever it is that you love to do and things will work out. It was something along those lines. And it was right after that I decided to quit doing slopestyle contests. And I remember calling my dad, and actually I called the head of Highball at the time. And I told him, hey, man, look, I don't think I got what it takes. I'm not going to be doing slopestyle contests anymore. And he told me, he was just like, dude, you know what? Don't stress about doing slopestyle contests. Not everybody needs to do that. And we're still going to support you and just kind of do whatever it is you feel like you want to do.
And it's not like you were winning the slopestyle contest anyway.
I know.
If you were a podium guy every week, it'd be one thing to step away. But if you're just getting 7th and 8th, it doesn't matter.
And that's exactly what I was doing, you know, and I see all these guys that were crushing at the time. And so I was like, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And I want to shoot photos and film, basically. And I want to ski in the backcountry. And just because I feel like putting that out there a little bit in the universe, I ended up meeting Bentley Atterbury, who had this little company called DOS Media. And he wanted to film. And he actually had gotten a snowmobile, and I knew how to snowmobile. So I helped teach him how to ride sleds. And he would go out and film. And one of my first video parts that I ever put together was for him. And it was pretty clear earlier on that I became like the big mountain backcountry jump guy for them because I had experience in all that stuff. And I could show everybody how to do beacon drills and all this stuff. And that's kind of how my whole film thing started, was filming with Bentley. And I filmed for him for 2 years. And then at this time, Moment had really started getting going, and I've been riding for them for probably 3 years. And Bentley quit, and then I was like, well, I need to keep filming, you know?
Yep.
So I convinced Moment to do a webisode called In the Moment in probably 2009, 2010, that winter. That's actually when things really started going because I was getting paid, and it really changed things having budget to be able to work on filming and shooting all year. And it wasn't much, but it was enough to where I could step away from coaching gymnastics and just focus on skiing all winter.
Is that the project where you end up breaking your neck as well?
Yeah.
Because that was a serious thing. That's just like a year after you quit the contest thing. And you guys have a 100-foot step up that you build, and you Rochambeau to do the guinea pigging. The guy who goes first comes up short. Does he splat the face of the jump when he comes up short?
Yeah, he pretty much like landed on the front.
Yeah, just like splat, like a video game.
Yeah, I mean, it was May 13th. It was interesting because the winter before that, I ended up meeting Joe Briggs through my friend Jason Tross, and that really kicked off my career, if you want to talk about that. I had been shooting photos with local photographers at Schweitzer and stuff like that, so I had a lot of experience with it, and I felt like I always kind of had an eye for a good shot. And I wanted to work with these bigger photographers and filmers, but I just never had the opportunity. So Joe Briggs came down to Tahoe, and I had all these places lined up that I knew would be, in my mind, really good to shoot. So I finally convinced him to go out there, and I took him out on the snowmobile, and I got a spare one. So I double him out there, and I show him these zones, and he's like, dude, this is unbelievable. And at the time, he was shooting with Zach Davison and some of those guys from Bellingham. And I can't remember why they were in South Lake, but this is probably 2008. And I take him out there and I show him this area in Tahoe. And in the period of like 2-3 hours, we ended up getting a photo annual, a ski journal cover, and like 2 or 3 other shots.
Damn.
Just from that one little session, all published. And that's when I kind of proved to the people that I was writing for, being Moment and a few others, that, look, I can get published. I can get your guys' name out there. Just give me a little bit of money to where I can do this full time, and I'll do 10 times as much.
Yep. And you're one of those dudes that's a go-getter. Like, you're going to shoot with everybody who wants to shoot whenever they want to shoot because you know you can produce stuff with them. Where some people, they're not all in. You're like 150% in, trying to make stuff happen for yourself.
Yeah, and not just purely for me, but for everybody. Like, if the photographer needs me to hike like 2 miles over to the next ridge as fast as possible at that time, and even now, I just would run. No question, be like, cool, I'll get up there. Give me freaking half an hour, I'll be there. So I just worked as hard as I possibly could, because I always had this feeling in my mind, for whatever reason, that I had to work twice as hard to get half as much as the next guy. I just never saw myself, honestly, earlier on in my career as a super talented guy. So I was like, I'm going to do whatever it takes to make this happen, because this is what I want to do with my life. So I finally got that one opportunity with Joe and made it count. And I had been emailing guys like Gunderson and Matthias Fredrickson and all the big names that I saw in the mags, Chris O'Connell, and I never heard back from them. Like, these are the guys that are getting published. This is who I need to shoot with. And it just never happened until I got a few photos published.
Sure.
And then that next winter, which is when I actually broke my neck, I had the best winter in my life at that point. I started the winter off actually with Moment needed an ad, and it was right around Thanksgiving, but it was super early, and Free Skier gave them just a crazy good deal because they needed to fill some ad space.
They just need the shot in 24 hours, pretty much.
Yeah, they gave us 72 hours.
Okay.
And at the time, I was in Las Vegas. So I get the call from them on Thanksgiving Day. And I don't know anybody but that one photographer, Joe Briggs. He can't do it because he's in Georgia. So I called Jason Tross, who basically was like my unofficial manager at the time. But he was just a good friend who had worked at Powder, and he had done a few other things. So he was involved periodically in the industry. And I just told him, I was just like, dude, I need to shoot this ad, and I don't know any of these photographers. Can you call Grant Gunderson and a few other people and see if they'd be down? And he's like, yep. And gets on the phone. I think he called Coble, Gunderson, and maybe 1 or 2 other people. And Gunderson hit him back in an hour. He's like, yep, I can shoot it. So I drove to Tahoe, packed up my stuff, and this is at 8 o'clock at night. Drove through the night, got to Bellingham. And the only place that had any snow was Whistler. They had snow up high. And we got a sunny day. It cleared up, had good snow, and ended up shooting. And Jeff Thomas showed up that day. He actually filmed a couple clips of me that ended up getting used in the Velourz movie. And I just did my normal thing, basically worked my ass off. And he told me, he's just like, man, you're going to kill it. We should shoot again later this winter. And I was so pumped. You have no idea. I was like, this is it.
And he's a big name in ski photography. If you're going to shoot with anybody, he's one of the guys.
Yeah. So I ended up blowing the first shot I ever did with Grant. And I was so pissed at myself. And Grant's just like, whatever. No big deal, And then ended up shooting with him, though, for 2 days. Went down to Baker and tried to shoot with him there, but got hit by north winds, and I went home. And I didn't want to bug Grant. And then I waited. And finally, end of January, he hit me up to do a story for Powder, and him and Zach Giffen came out to Tahoe, and I showed him around. And then I got the opportunity to shoot with Grant again later in the year and got a bunch of stuff and ended up just having an incredible season, being able to shoot with Grant a lot. And then I met Coble that year too and shot with him a little bit at Stevens Pass, and then did that web series as well, which was pretty well received. And I was just coming out of the winter just like on fire, just working with all these big people, and my skiing really progressed that winter for some reason. I think it was just being so hyper focused solely on skiing. And I just got a little too confident, basically, because I had spent the whole winter out of the park, and then I came back to Tahoe and things were getting slushy and I wanted to keep filming. So I was just like, screw it, let's just go build some big spring jumps. And I mean, build like 100-foot step up with a sticky in run to a frozen landing. I just like, I don't even care, because we had 3 jumps built that day, and I just thought, screw it, let's just tick these all off so we can get it done, because we were supposed to go to a park shoot the next day. And yeah, I just was like, screw it, and didn't listen to my inner spidey sense and just sent it. And yeah, I ended up breaking my C2 vertebrae in half, basically.
And this is like a terrible injury that we're not even going to talk about. Now it is time for my final sponsor break, and I'm going to start things off with Stanley, the brand that has been a leader in keeping things hot and cold for over 100 years. They invented the vacuum bottle, and you've seen it so many times in your life. You know, that green bottle that kept your grandpa and your dad's coffee hot all day long? Well, Stanley still makes a bottle like that, and they work better than whatever you're using right now. The reason Stanley is the leader in hot and cold is because their product is better. I mean, they created the category and they keep innovating. But Stanley makes so much more than that iconic bottle. I personally use the water bottles and pint glasses daily, and my drinks stay hotter or colder than yours by at least an hour. You deserve that same quality. Now you can get 30% off all Stanley products by heading to their site, stanley-pmi.com, entering the code Powell and the number 30, all one word, and boom, it's that easy. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery, and they have been brewing beer out of Bend, Oregon since 2006. And since they started brewing beer, they are committed to skiing, snowboarding, biking, and drinking beer outside. While I see a lot of copycat brands out there lately trying to mimic what 10 Barrel is doing in the outdoor space, no one puts their money where their mouth is like 10 Barrel. This year, they produced both a ski and a snowboard movie. The ski movie is Watch This, featuring Lucas Walks, and then they have Hold My Beer, a snowboard movie featuring Curtis Cizik. And the plan was for 10 Barrel to throw 3 Hella Big Air events where they give away a ton of money and throw a huge party for everybody in attendance. Unfortunately, the final 2 events at Mount Bachelor and Mount Hood Meadows will be canceled. The good news is that even with all that we're going through, you can still drink beer outside. Next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Profuse Juice, a hazy IPA that I'm loving right now, and a beer that gives 1% of sales back to the Surfrider Foundation. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. I want you to rattle off each of your injuries because you have had so many. Can you just list them off?
Yeah, I guess broken my foot twice, my leg twice, blown out both knees, broken my ribs 3 times, broken my neck, back, left hand, collarbone, lacerated my spleen, collapsed my lung. That's like the short list.
You've done so many things, but the crazy thing with you is you don't ever seem to miss a full season. It's like you always seem to get a few weeks in a season before you blow yourself up. Have you missed a full season because of injury?
No, this is actually the first winter that I've had a season-ending injury in my whole career. And even through all of those, because when I broke my neck, I wasn't mountain biking full-time. So I missed out on motocross. That was actually the last year that I raced Moto, was the season before. And so I somehow have always been able to slip it into the shoulder season where I kind of have 2 months to recover, and then it's just right back into the full season again.
Which is pretty amazing for all those injuries to not miss that much time. You get healthy, and a lot of those shots with Grant help build your name within skiing. There's a lot of momentum behind you, or more momentum behind you. You've got to be a lot more confident in things because it's actually working out. And it's time to graduate from spending time in Tahoe, spending time in the Pacific Northwest. You're going to go up to Whistler. It's like 2 years of couch surfing with you. Is this when you start putting together projects with Jeff Thomas and doing a lot of Velourz stuff?
You know, the Velourz stuff actually came because Jeffy actually asked me to film with Poor Boys. And we went to Moment, and as you know, skiing is very much a pay-to-play game, you know?
Yeah.
That's kind of how it works. And nobody would put up the money for me. And I think that was the year that they did Revolver, and I got asked to film with Poor Boys, and I couldn't do it. I was super bummed.
Because they're like the holy grail for you probably at that point.
Them and Level 1. And I didn't get the opportunity. And so instead of getting super bummed and quitting or something, and I always loved the Velourz movies, I ended up talking to Schmuck, and he was just like, well, you should just talk to Darren. And I went and tracked him down at the trade show, and I just told him, hey, this is the deal, and I got all this footage, and what would you think? And he basically was like, who is this guy? Like, what do you want from me? And I ended up filming and getting a lot of footage from doing the second season of the In the Moment stuff. I kept all of my A shots, and I gave them to Darren, and I got a segment in Look on the Bright Side. The whole time I wanted to film. I've had a good career, and it started with shooting photos, but it was kind of because, I just happened to be good at that, and I really would do anything to make my ski career work. And I knew that eventually I wanted to be able to film, and if it meant shooting photos to where I could ski all the time and not be working a real job, then that's what I was going to do. So I filmed with Velourz for 3 years, and then they decided to shut down. And this is right at the time I signed with Eddie Bauer. And lo and behold, I got the opportunity to film with Poor Boys.
Totally amazing how that works. And just thinking about how you go to Velourz, how you go to Darren, and you're pretty much, I won't say pushing yourself on him, but you have to be your biggest fan and self-promoter to make things happen for yourself. And is it like you have to have no shame? Do you feel that way when you're pitching yourself?
Yeah, there's a weird thing when you really cold call, basically. And it's interesting with what I'm kind of in now, being in LA. But yeah, it really is an interesting thing where you kind of have to just be like, all right, I'm just going to go up and I'm going to try and basically tell this guy how freaking cool I am, without annoying the shit out of him so that he will put me in this movie. And I want to convince him that I am the guy, because I am the guy. But it also comes from believing and knowing in yourself that you do have what it takes. If you have a shred of doubt in your mind, then they're going to sense that. And for some reason, and Darren has told me this when I went up to him, he just was like, you were just so convinced that I was like, cool, okay. And he asked Schmuck, and Schmuck was like, yeah, Casey's a super good guy. He's like, all right, cool, screw it. I'll take a free segment. We don't have to pay somebody to film you. He's like, cool. Worst case, we don't use it. But then I got him the footage, and he was like, holy shit, this is sick. So Darren gave me that opportunity to get my footage out there,
Yeah. So to another part of your life, we'll just assume skiing is on autopilot and growing for you at this point. But 2012, you go out to Rampage, and that's an insane event. I always encourage everybody to go see that thing live. Does anything in the ski world come close to the risk factor of Rampage?
Not really. Skiing in Alaska, skiing a big line in Alaska and trying to ski it how Alaska's being skied now, where you're skiing it really fast and you're trying to trick features high up.
Yep.
That is kind of on par, but yeah, not really. I mean, Rampage is just, it's another level. It's a whole nother ball game.
So you go to that event and you leave. You have a serious history with bikes. You're a top-ranked Norba Nationals rider. You won Canada Cups or were in them. And did you just think back to your biking days and you were like, hey, I'm really good on a bike. I love the free ride element of skiing, and I know I can take my ski mentality and transfer that to the bike world. Is that kind of what goes through your head?
It was actually the moto skills. Because for me, like going to Rampage and then looking at that, I was like, this is like small time. I mean, when I was racing moto, I was hitting jumps that were 100, 150 feet all the time. Like I loved hitting huge, like 100 to 150 foot natural terrain stuff out in the desert. There's even jumps on the tracks in SoCal that are 100, 120 feet all the time. So for me, jumping, I've been doing that forever. And then the free ride side from skiing and knowing how to manage your speed and stuff like that all just played together. And I always wanted to ride a downhill bike. So for me, I was like, this is it. I'm going to do this. And I was actually with a bunch of skiers. I was with Jen Hudak and Rachel Burks, and Pep was there. And I actually told them, and like many, many times in my life, Pep has just laughed at me. And he was just like, dude, you're going to freaking die if you try this. And I was like, no, dude, I'm going to do this. And so I was skiing for Scott at the time, and I hit him up. I got a freeride bike, And I was like, screw it, I'm just going to go out in the desert and start riding and basically emulate what was going on at Rampage. And it really all just started from there, from that one fall in 2012. The other thing is I felt like I had the cheat codes because I knew how it worked shooting photos and filming and skiing. And a lot of the photographers that shoot skiing all shoot mountain biking. You know, Steve Lloyd, who helped me start my whole bike career, Matthias Fredrickson, Gunderson, you go down the list, and they all do that in the summer. So I already knew them. I was established in skiing at this point, so I just knew who to talk to. Whereas before, when I was emailing all these people and not getting a response, now I got them on speed dial. You know, so I tell all these people like, "Hey, I'm starting a bike now. Let me know if you need a spare dude on the trip." And it all just kind of like spun from there.
So do you start getting photos published in the bike world just like you do in the ski world, and that's kind of your in, and then things start happening for you?
Yeah.
Same roadmap.
Exact same roadmap. And for me, I was super, super focused on doing Rampage. That's what I really wanted to do. So I started filming with Steve, and I tried to get a video together, and I tried to get in 2013, didn't get in. So then I helped dig at Rampage that year, and the organizers said, you know what, this guy's just not at the level. He couldn't handle Rampage. So I was pissed. I was like, dude, I can handle it. So I actually stayed afterwards, and I just hit a lot of the stuff in the Rampage zone after the contest was done in 2013. So I filmed all that. I put it out, and I sent it to Barber and all the organizers, and then that's how I ended up getting an athlete invite in 2014.
Yeah, so you get in there in 2014, and how does Rampage go for you?
It was interesting. I ended up getting hurt in practice, so I didn't actually end up riding finals or any of that stuff, but it was good. It was a really good learning experience, actually, because there's a lot of pressure that goes on there, and it's all pressure with just getting your line finished, because at the time, Paul Bass and I are good friends, and we ended up teaming up on a line together, and you got basically 5 days to build a complete line, and nobody really understands that.
Yeah.
And that's so much backbreaking work. So you're there from not even dawn till dusk or whatever. I mean, it's literally you're out there at dark to dark. And then you're physically and mentally exhausted building your line. And then you build the biggest stuff that's basically ever been hit on a mountain bike. And then after breaking your back and just being exhausted for the entire week, at that time, you go straight into trying your line out, straight into practice, straight into qualifying. No break whatsoever. So I'm exhausted physically and mentally, and then I don't want to screw up because it's my first year and I want to really prove myself. Paul and I ended up building the biggest dirt-to-dirt feature on the Rampage venue. So I'm like doing that, and I'm doing pretty good. I ended up guinea pigging that, got that a few times under my belt, and I'm working the butterflies out. And then Seminuk actually built this kind of weird lip on our outrun. And I was a little nervous about that, but I was like, oh, whatever, it's going to be fun. And for some reason, even though I had hit that gap maybe 4 or 5 times, I saw Paul actually in front of me fall on it really hard. And he just kind of got bucked on the takeoff and ended up just smashing his head super hard.
Okay.
Like, I still don't know how he was okay on that. I was pretty nervous because it's Paul Bass. Dude's, legendary. So if Paul's going to fall, I really want to make sure that I got the speed dialed on this because I wanted to try a trick on it. And in hindsight, I mean, it's all a learning experience, really.
You've been on a mountain bike like 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I just ended up hitting that same jump again the next day in practice and went a little deep on it. And as I was turning to go onto the ridge, I just slipped my rear tire and I high-sided, avoiding that next lip. And I was so focused on just the turn and then getting onto the ridge and carrying my speed down. I don't know, just a momentary lapse, I just slipped out and high-sided and ended up breaking some ribs. So it took me out. And then the next year, life just kind of happened and I got an alternate spot again and ended up having kind of a weird feeling where I got kind of like a late alternate spot, and I had just bought a house in Whistler and I was trying to renovate that, and I was so scattered. I just felt like, you know what, I'm just going to take a year, not do it. And then I just want to be really, really focused so I don't make the same mistake And that's actually the year that Paul Bass got paralyzed on that line that we built together.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Paul a bunch about that and to Zink and other guys and stuff. And that's what really changed things for the better for Rampage, because now they have a build time, they have a mandatory day or 2-day break, and now it's really, really well done. And for some reason before, they just tried to get it into a tighter schedule, and it all kind of came to a head, and it was a very tense environment that year. Kind of happy that I wasn't there, to be honest.
Yeah. When you entered the bike world, did bikers look at you as some novelty skier guy, or did they take you seriously?
Yeah.
You were the novelty?
Yeah, people just kind of were just like, even my friends, like Mason, who I've shot with for years, and other people are like, oh, he's just getting sponsors, or he's just getting this or that because of who he is in skiing. That always, it doesn't really anymore for me, but earlier on in my ski career and in my bike career, it really drove me. Anytime somebody talked negatively about me in any way, I always fed off of that. If somebody said I sucked, it was just like more fuel to the fire, kind of,
Yep.
But I kind of took that, it's like a bit of an offense to be like, no, like I'm here because I got skills on the bike. So after that first year and a half, that's when people were like, oh no, this guy can actually ride,
Yeah, it takes a while. But I'm going to glance over some things in your career just because of time. 2015 in the bike world, you're a semifinalist for the GoPro Line of the Year. You're in the 9 Nights event. Is that like the 9 Kings event?
Well, it's the same. Yeah, 9 Nights is Nico Zasek.
So just a stupid course, like the most ridiculous thing you've ever ridden?
Yeah, it's just like the sickest thing ever. Just so much fun. This was before the Fest series started too, so you're just hitting huge kickers and stuff. Just perfectly built. It was just so much fun to do that content.
And then 2016, you do Red Bull Skygate. There's a bunch of Crankworks events after that. So you're doing a ton of stuff, and you're doing well in the Crankworks events that you're a part of. Then on the ski side, things are opening up for you too. You have the Skiers Cup. You're on a team with Seth Morrison, I think. ABMA, because it was North America versus Europe. You won 2 years. You lost 1 year. You end up leaving Moment and going to Fisher, which creates a bunch of opportunity for you. First, how tough is it to leave Moment, the brand that you've been on forever and probably making pennies from?
It was tough in the sense of that was all that I knew, really. I mean, that was like the brand that I started with. But at the same time, it was always a little tough getting paid, and stuff like that. So in the other sense, it wasn't that tough to leave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
It was tougher to leave the friendships and the people that I had worked with Luke and Casey and stuff like that. But when it came to actually getting a solid paycheck for a couple of years and a brand that was really focused on pushing advertising and wanted to push their brand image, that to me was really easy.
They put you in level 1. You get to film with them for 4 movies, which is a dream come true for you. You also have the Blank Collective thing going on with, I think, Jeff Thomas and crew. This year, you're not in the Blank Collective project at all that I saw. You have been in every other one. What's the reasoning behind you not being in it?
Well, I started Blank after Poor Boys 20 because there wasn't really anything going on, and I knew that I needed to film. Alexi Godbout was pretty much new into the scene, and I just didn't really have anything going on, and I had an idea actually to do my own movie or just the concept of doing the first Blank movie I had in mind. And I had just seen it happening over the years where I knew what it took to put a movie together. I knew the budgets and everything like that. I knew the filmers. I knew the editors, with Jan Schuster and Darren Rayner had Magnifier and stuff. And I knew all these guys that weren't going to be filming. So I had this idea, and I hit up Alexi and Dyack, and we had Vinny in there, and a few other people that we got together with Max Morello, and Mike Hendetuck ended up in there. That's basically how it kicked off, was I ended up directing that whole thing and producing it.
So this is your project, that you're not in this last one.
Yeah, and so basically what happened was, going into the next year, I ran into Berman, and he was like, yay, I want to know about this Blank deal. And this was in the summer months in Whistler, and I was like, yeah, sure. And I had done a bike edit with Berman, and he just reached out, and he finally asked me to film with Level 1, which was a dream. And to be honest, doing the Blank thing that first year was fucking hard, man. I mean, I was doing everything. I was organizing trips. I was doing all this stuff, and it was a lot of work. And trying to figure out how to put a movie on iTunes. And then I did all the rough edit. And then I was going in every day while nobody else did anything.
So the skiing's the easy part for everybody?
Yeah, and that's the deal. Is the original concept was blank as a collective of people that are all working together, and we all do a part. And there was times where I would send an email out to all the guys and be like, okay, I need 5 to 10 songs that you want in your video part or in the movie, and then I'll try and put them all together and we'll see what songs we can get. And then nobody'd reply. And the only one that was like kind of involved was Alexi. But he had blown his knee, so he was back in Quebec rehabbing. So I'm doing everything. And I just was like, this is too much. So Berman asked me to film with Level 1, which is honestly, it was just like one of the crowning jewels, like the dream come true of my career. The fact that I could finally film with Level 1, I was like, I have to do this,
Yeah.
So he asked me to film with one segment of the movie up in Alaska. So I was like, you know what? You guys all need to step up and help me with this. And they ended up not really doing that. So going into the next winter, I told Alexi and everybody that I was going to film with Level 1 for at least April. But I would focus on the movie if everybody would pitch in. And come mid-January, I had all of my budget set from my sponsors and nobody else had taken care of theirs yet. And in my mind, we should have been filming at the time.
Yep.
And then February rolls around. I couldn't do it, basically. I was just like, we need to have everything in line. We just lost basically a month to a month and a half of filming. And if you guys aren't going to step up, I'm done. And right after that, I got asked to go to India with Level 1 as well. So I was like, you know what? You guys can take this on. And if you want to film, you can film and you can take blank over. But I'm not going to do this by myself. And to the guys' credit, they stepped up and they did it. And they ended up getting the movie done in basically they started filming like mid-February. And they filmed for the rest of the winter. And they ended up coming out with the second movie, which I think was Beyond Blank.
Mm-hmm.
And then going into the next year, I filmed with Blank. And not last winter, but the winter before, I was planning on filming with them. And that's when they brought Jeff Thomas on.
Okay.
And I'm not really sure what happened there, but I don't know. I went to go show up to a meeting, to be perfectly honest, and I was outside Jeff's place, and I was skiing with Stan and Alexi before that, and I'm still filming with Level 1, but I was going to split, and I told those guys, like, hey, I really want to focus on doing blank, and I want to be able to help you guys with whatever you need, obviously, and basically have it come back to the same concept to everybody helping out. So anything that you guys need, let me know. So this was like the first planning meeting, and I showed up, and Alexi and Stan were like, yep, cool, we'll see you there. And then I was trying to figure out which place was Jeff's, and Jeff was just like, if Casey comes in, I'm leaving.
Jeff Thomas was?
Yeah.
Oh, weird.
Very weird. And I just was so baffled, and I was like, well, you know what? That's it. I'm done. And I kind of had the feeling where I was just like, I was really happy with what I started with blank, because in the end, it worked out great because I really got to focus on filming with Level 1. Instead of splitting my time between blank and Level 1, which I did the year before, I mean, I was going so hard. I didn't have a free day because I was just going back and forth between two film projects. So I spent the whole winter just filming with Level 1, and I really put together one of the best segments I had ever done.
Are you still friends with the blank guys?
Oh, yeah.
That's just a weird thing. Do you guys ever talk about that?
I've never talked actually to Jeff Thomas about that, what the deal is with, like, if Casey walks in, I'm fucking leaving,
Yeah.
And I don't know what the deal was. Obviously, I've seen Jeff plenty of times since and stuff. And I just told those guys, I was like, you know what? If you really wanted me to be involved with the movie and to help out and be a part of the project, you would have stood up for me in that time, and you would have let Jeff know that, like, he's here to help and to be a part of the planning for the movie, so we need to figure out what's going on. But I just told him, I was just like, you guys didn't do that, and I don't actually have any bad blood or bad feeling or whatever towards that. It just is what it is. And I kind of took it as I was just meant to go in a different direction. But no, I'm super. Alexi and Stan are two really good friends of mine, and I've been friends with Jeff forever. And I kind of was like, all right, well, moving up and moving on. And then the next winter, which was the previous winter, then I also focused purely again on putting the best segment I could with Level 1 for their last movie. The best I've ever skied in my life was last winter. I was really thankful for that winter and being able to just focus purely on putting a segment together for Friedel and for Berman, you know?
Yeah, but I'll say in your ski career, and your bike career for that matter, you were always a dude that was, I would say, B plus skier in the grand scheme of things. If your Seths and other people are A's, you never quite hit that level where you're being marketed as the guy all the time, but you're still a big athlete in both sports. Did that ever bother you that you had like a certain ceiling to your name?
Not really. I mean, no, not really. I mean, it is interesting because you talk about like Skiers Cup and stuff like that, and that was something where like it did bug me a little bit, to be honest, in the beginning, because I was always known a little bit as a photo guy or this, or I wasn't that. And I kind of got wrapped up a little bit in that of just like who maybe I was or what the label was or something like that. And in 2012, when I went to Skiers Cup, I was like a last second invite. I was shooting a story for Powder in Argentina with Gunderson and Michelle Parker and Heimer, big name drops. And I got asked last second because I was down there to fill in for somebody that couldn't come to Chile. And I showed up, and I mean, that's like the heavyweights, the who's who from Europe and the who's who from North America. And I showed up that year as basically some of the guys are just like didn't really know too much about me.
Yeah, like, oh, nice to meet you, Casey. You're from where?
Yeah, and Cody always backed me super hard. Cody, Townsend, and Lee Sogstead have always been so freaking amazing. I mean, they're such rad people in general.
There, I don't think Elise likes me, and I don't know why, but that's okay.
For me, they've just always been great. So Cody was just like, no, Casey's the guy, and ended up showing up and winning every single one of my heats. And the first guy that I beat was Jakob Wetzer. I'll never forget. I skied down into the corral and I like flipped my top hit at the top of the course on a big mountain venue and ski down, like ski my line and stuff like that, end up winning. And I am behind Jakob and I hear him say, oh my God, I can't believe I got beat by some guy I don't even know who the fuck he is. And I felt so good. And then ended up winning my next round. And then going into the final day, they ended up just doing 3-on-3. They had to cancel the backcountry jump portion of it. So we go back up, and Cody selects me as one of the guys to go back up to represent Team Americas. And it came back down to the final point. And if I would have lost, the Team Americas would have lost and ended up getting the final point, and the Team Americas won that winter. And for me to be there with ABBA and all these, Cody and all these huge names, and to stand as like an equal and be like, fucking right, B-rate skier? Like, how does a B-rate skier, as you call it, come and ski on the same level as everybody else?
When I say B-rate, I wouldn't say it is your skiing ability by any means.
I know, exactly. So that was one where I showed up, like, I just walked out with my head high,
Yeah.
Not arrogantly, but where I just was finally realized that, like, it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or says. I know that I can ski on that level. And I just always feel almost indebted to Cody for inviting me to that, because that was just such a cool thing to be a part of. And that's where I feel like things really shifted. And what you mentioned about Seth, there was another year at Skiers Cup where it really kind of set into me that I'm in Zermatt and I'm standing on top. And for one, JP invited me, which JP was was a good friend, but he was also just like, he was a legend, and
For
somebody
sure.
that I really looked up to. And I'm standing on top of this ridgeline on the jump day. And all of a sudden, I just kind of stopped and I looked over and realized that I'm discussing the last jump. And I just was like, we got to double back this bottom jump. Like, this is just so perfect for a dub back. And I look over and I'm talking to JP Auclair and Seth Morrison. And I'm like, how the hell did I get here? How did this happen? And I just was like, you know what? You just can't worry about the label or whatever it is that somebody puts on you. You do what you want to do and go where you want to go. And so it maybe bothered me earlier in my career. Even stuff will pop up sometimes where people will be like, oh, that guy's just like a model and he's just gets along because he's good looking. Like that was some recent comment that I was laughing at with one of my sponsors. And it's just like, dude, you know what? You want to go with that, go with that. Or somebody wants to give you shit, dude, it doesn't really matter.
I would say that there are some A-list guys, and the thing that they don't have that you have always had, and it's probably because the way you approach everything, is the amount of sponsors you have. Given you have 2 sports that can sponsor you, but you've always had people paying you.
Mm-hmm.
From what I guesstimate right now, it's Eddie Bauer, Fisher, Arcade, Shred, Whistler, Blackcomb, Descent, Canyon, Envy, Answer. Who am I missing?
Yeah, that's basically it. I write for Schwalbe Tires as well. But yeah, I've always managed to have a good list, and I think that a big part of that is just being a good person. If you're a good person and you work hard, that's going to, I think, carry you further than being super talented. I was just discussing that with my girlfriend recently. If you're super talented and you're a dickhead and you're hard to work with, why would you have a ton of sponsors?
Good person is one thing, but work hard is the most important thing. If you're a good person and you don't work hard, no one wants to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
But you've always not only been a good person, not only had the work ethic, but you've had a hustle and a confidence that, you know, when I talk to people about you for this podcast, because I try to do my research and figure out who you are, and you have haters. Everybody has haters. And I would say your haters don't like you because of your supreme confidence, maybe even narcissism a little bit. And that's probably what you need to get to where you are today. And that's even the people that love you acknowledge that. And they're like, yeah, dude, that's just who he is. And he's awesome. Do you see that at all in yourself?
Yeah, maybe sometimes. I mean, I think that having resounding confidence in who you are and what you do, you really have to believe. My opinion is that you need that, but the only thing you don't need is any arrogance or any ego. As soon as you have that in, there's like something else going on that you need to figure out. But yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of always wanted to work as hard as I possibly could and harder than the next guy, no matter what.
Okay. The next chapter in your life is you're going to be an actor. You're in Los Angeles. You're taking acting lessons. And is the end goal to be an actor? Is it to be a stuntman? Because a stuntman makes logical sense. But do you want to be an actor?
Yes.
Not a stuntman?
No, it's interesting because I got interested in becoming a stuntman because I sold a motorcycle to a guy and he was a stunt coordinator in Vancouver. And anyway, I kind of like went down the road. And then once I started getting into it, the stunt thing's pretty tricky to get into. It's kind of like being a professional skier, professional mountain biker. It's a small clique of guys that all essentially know each other and girls. And so once I started down that road, everybody just kept saying, hey, just make sure you take a couple acting classes. Take a couple acting classes. So I did, and I ended up just loving it. And it's really interesting because it's completely different than my perception of what acting was. I don't even know how to describe it, almost like self-discovery. You essentially become a better person just by going to class and figuring out what is holding you back. And acting is actually the same exact thing that's holding you back in your personal life that you maybe don't even realize. Whether it's something that triggers you from earlier in life of your parents arguing or people telling you that you're a B-list skier or something like that, you know, and then you realize you have like this weird kind of self-judgment that you never even realized about yourself. And so if you get rid of that, then you can essentially move forward. So it's been a pretty interesting journey, I guess you would say, and something that I was very, very surprised by. But it's the only thing that I've found that I love as much as doing the sports that I love to do, skiing, biking, surfing. I get the same enjoyment out of even going to class and doing scenes. It's very, very interesting, even to me, that I love it as much as I do.
Well, I hear you're amazing at impressions, and in your best impression, I would like you to say, you're listening to the Powell Movement.
Oh, I might. I reckon you're listening to the Powell Movement.
Perfect. In your next best voice, can you say, you're listening to the fucking Powell Movement?
You're listening to the fucking Powell Movement.
That one wasn't as good. In your third best voice, can you do that same one?
Right. Throw me a freaking bone here. You're listening to the fucking Powell Movement.
Sweet. I might use those in some of my intros, but that is not going to be the only thing that gets you to be an actor is just your impressions. You're going to have to be a good actor. And it seems like you need to network, you need to meet people, you need to make stuff happen, which is what you've done your whole career in ski and bike. Is that what you're doing now? Going out and trying to meet as many people as possible? Is that kind of that world?
Yeah, yeah, it kind of is. It's interesting because you can be the best person, just like you could be the best skier, and if nobody knows who you are, then you're never going to be a pro skier. You know what I mean? You're never going to have sponsors if you don't get out there. But it's been happening. I mean, I made a short film, which hopefully we'll put out here soon, with a friend of mine, and a director side, and I just worked on this TV show for Apple TV Plus before the whole lockdown started. The producer is producing another feature film that's coming out, I think, this fall. I ended up calling actually my girlfriend, and he needed somebody as a supporting role, and so I worked on my first feature film right after I wrapped filming on that TV show and stuff. So yeah, it's really just meeting people, and I think more so it's one, having the talent, and then also the same thing as skiing and biking or anything else. It's just being a good person to work with.
Yeah.
But you do have to know everybody. It's just interesting how it is such a different world, like because I'm involved with June Shine. Long story, I ended up at the head offices of MGM for the series premiere of Vikings, which is like a big TV show. So I'm there and I'm like kind of cruising around, and it's just the cast, crew, and maybe like a couple of the producers and stuff, and then the studio heads from MGM. And it felt so strange to be there. And I actually learned a very valuable lesson earlier on, but part of it is just being exactly who you are. Being who you are in LA and who I am and where I've come from is I'm a professional skier and I'm a professional athlete. And I have a lot of life experience that is very different, and you realize that you are just an interesting person as who you are. You don't need to be anything else. My point is, when I went there, you're talking to all these people, and when I'm in a huge group and I don't know anybody, I kind of just want to almost recoil a bit and just do my thing,
Yeah.
I want to be back in the backcountry with the boys, filming and being in my comfort zone, and that's very much out of my comfort zone. And ended up talking to the guy who's like the lead on the show. Dude grew up skiing Whistler, and him and his whole family are going up there for Christmas and knows like Stan, Ray, and Ryan, and like a bunch of people I know. And it just kind of was like a good reminder of just to be yourself at all points in time,
Yeah, and I talked to Nick Martini, and he's got Steps Studios now in LA, and his business, when he was able to move out to California, he was able to cut through a lot of the bullshit because he had such a history with Stepped where he didn't come in as an unknown. It's like you don't come in as an unknown actor like most people who maybe have gone to schools. Mm-hmm. You've been on camera for 20 years. It's just in a different respect.
Yeah.
So I think you do have a leg up when you get there. But it sounds like things are moving really fast for you in the acting world, just like they did in the bike world for you when you decided to do that. And that's your life and times. I'm going to end it there. But I'm going to jump into something that I call inappropriate questions. And what I do is I get a person that you know to ask you 3 inappropriate questions. First, can you tell me your history with Darren Rayner?
Darren Rayner's the head of Velourz, and Darren is a bit of a legend in ski and snowboarding. I met him at SIA in probably 2011, where I just kind of cold called him, went up and told him I wanted to be in his movie. And that's what really set off my film career on another level, because I went from DOS to working with Velourz, which also had a clothing brand, and the movie supported the clothing brand each year. And so Darren, Gio, and Harvey Lee were like the 3 masterminds behind Velourz. So that's Darren Rayner.
All right. Well, Darren has some inappropriate questions for you. I like to do 3 inappropriate questions, but during this quarantine, Darren came up with more, so we're going to start with question number 1.
Let's go.
Casey, what's your makeup routine for your Eddie Bauer photo shoot?
Okay, well, it takes typically about a half an hour. Hair goes last. Typically, it's just foundation, making sure your face is not shiny, and then they do your hair. And that's pretty much it. I'm like in and out pretty damn quick.
How often have you had your hair done?
Oh my God, countless times, actually.
Okay, just curious.
It's pretty insane. It's funny, too, because carrying over into the movie world of like showing up and then going through hair and makeup, I was like, oh, wow, this is actually just like doing a photo shoot for, Eddie Bauer or a different brand or something like that. So it's actually kind of funny.
Yeah, when I was at K2, the only makeup that we had was for Kiss when we dressed everybody up as Kiss, but then we couldn't release that poster and ad campaign because we were going to get sued by them. We'll go with question number 2.
You've said multiple times that your favorite actor is Vin Diesel. Which of his amazing qualities do you share with him?
Mainly strength and muscle size. I'm extremely ripped.
Do you really say that Vin Diesel is your favorite actor?
No.
And we're just going to cut that question. It's not even worth it to have it in there. He just said it. We'll go with question number 2.
Now that you're a full-time actor, how do you maintain an authentic relationship with your fans?
I was actually a little nervous about telling people that I'm an actor and that I'm working on stuff now. And what I've found is maintaining honesty with your audience, no matter what it is. People come, people go, but being yourself is amazing, because I actually just talked to a couple of people the other day, and everybody that I've told that I'm acting and that I'm working on stuff now, they're stoked.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cool.
Yeah, so that's just me. I'm still going to ski and bike and whatever. It's just an evolution of kind of who I am, and I think basically if people want to stay on for the ride, then they can, and if they don't, they don't.
All right, we're going to go with his next inappropriate question. He didn't really crush these inappropriate questions. I thought they were okay, but they're really not cutting it right now.
I hope you put that in.
Walk us through your daily regimen to keep your modeling body. What's your secret?
We're going to cut through that one.
How did you land such a hot blonde babe? What was your pickup line?
I'm not even going to let you answer those questions. You know why? Because I went with another set of inappropriate questions with another friend of yours, because I didn't know these questions were going to be that bad, but I talked to Stan Ray, who happens to be the god of inappropriate questions. I don't know Stan at all.
Oh my God, you need to have Stan on.
Yeah.
Stan is a freaking legend.
I asked him for 3 questions. He didn't even make me record with him. He just texted them over. He did it within 5 minutes, and they're probably some of the best ones ever. So we're going to go with Stan's first inappropriate question.
Hey, Casey, Stan here. I got a couple questions for you. First question. Does your little guy wear a crew neck or a turtleneck?
Turtleneck. Rolled up.
All right, we will go with his second inappropriate question.
Question number 2. Would you rather watch your parents have sex every day for the rest of your life, or join in once and make it stop?
Oh my God.
So good.
I don't even know how to answer that.
Well, you got to think about it. This is the curse that's going to be put upon you for the rest of your life. You're going to have to wake up and then...
I'd watch.
Every day for an hour?
Dude.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to try to change your mind there. Now we will jump into his third and final inappropriate question.
And last question. When you wipe your butt, do you fold or crumple? And do you check every single time you wipe to see how much poop's left on the toilet paper?
Fold. I've always fold. I've been a folder since childhood, and I always make sure that I got a clean wipe. I'm not going to stand up and then realize that I didn't wipe enough. That's just horrible. You just can't go from there. Then your day's ruined.
Especially if it's hot and humid out.
Yes.
Well, that is the podcast. I want to thank you for your time. Your career has been like a hustle, man. It's like a ton of talent, and then you have made things happen, and your talent has been able to come out once you've had people believe in you. But it's like you've had to constantly say, hey, look at me, believe in me, then they do, and then you shine and you graduate to the next thing. Not too many people can do that in 2 different sports, and now you're doing it in acting. It sounds like that's happening really quickly for you too. And on the acting world, I want to see you on my A-list, so hopefully we'll see that in the next year or 2.
Yeah, sounds good. I'll leave it with this, a great quote that I just heard recently. I'd rather hustle 24/7 than grind 9 to 5.
So that was time with Casey Deane, and he is about as self-confident as they come, and I like it. I'm sure it can rub some people the wrong way, but there is something to be said for a dude that believes in himself and gets shit done. I'm sure you could tell from listening that Casey didn't like it when I said B-level pro skier, and that kind of bothered me after the podcast. I wasn't trying to insult the dude, but I was calling it as I see it, and that's the goal with this podcast, to tell the stories as I see them. I used the analogy of Tom Brady and Drew Bledsoe when I was talking about the Hall of Fame with Greg Stump a few weeks ago, and it applies here too. Tom Brady is an A-list quarterback, and Drew Bledsoe is a B-list one. There is no argument there. And I guess with Casey, I was trying to say that if Seth Morrison is an A-list skier, then Casey Deane is a B-list skier. He was offended by that, and I don't think there should be any shame in that. Casey still makes up the 1%. He's a pro athlete in 2 sports, and it's going to be interesting to see where his acting career goes. A dude like Casey, who's a good networker and is not afraid to self-promote, has the opportunity to do big things in his next career. But like with skiing, it takes so much more than talent to make the A-list, and I hope he does. That's the show for this week. At this point, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to ask you to do a huge favor for me. I want you to rate me on iTunes. If you have an iPhone, all you need to do is click on the podcast icon, search for the Powell Movement, click my logo, scroll down until you see the stars, tap 5 stars, and you're done. It takes about 45 seconds, and if you're on an Android phone, I have no idea how to rate me, but I'm sure you can figure that out on your own. You can also email me with any questions or concerns. My email is mike@thepowellmovement, and I will get back to you. Finally, I need to thank my amazing sponsors who make this show happen. They are Evo, 686, Stanley, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Please be safe, everyone, and have a great week.